You know, Al, sunny day and all that, I drove the little convertible in.
Yeah.
Risky.
Well, yeah, it's risky. First of all, because you probably burnt your skin. Direct sunlight.
Yeah.
I mean, it's honestly a real death trap. But also, you don't have power steering in that thing.
No power brakes. No roll bar.
The roof doesn't even go up. It's really, it is a death trap.
Yeah.
It's very low to the ground also, which I feel is unsafe, but I might be making that up. That part might not be a problem.
Yeah. See, all of that shows that I can be a bit of a risk taker.
Sure, yeah.
Right?
Well, I mean, we all are in some ways. Maybe you're more of a risk taker, but how do you calculate how much risk you should be taking?
Like a scissor scale.
What?
Do you run with them?
No.
Oh, well, see, there you go.
That's okay. I don't know that's a very good scale to use when it comes to your car. I don't understand what's happening.
Well, the gentleman with us now knows a lot about it. He is the director of the documentary Risk Factor and the driving force behind the Risk Factor Initiative. Please welcome the award-winning filmmaker, Mr. Robert Lang.
Hi there, guys.
Hey.
Welcome back to the show, Robert. Tell everybody, first of all, about the documentary. Because I was saying to you before we came back on air, it's very, it's got quite a big scope.
Yeah, it's a very big scope, and the idea was to look at all the messages we get through the media, in the news, online. We get these messages about what's risky and what's not. You know, are we really at risk of terrorist attacks? Are we really at risk, as you put it, of getting irradiated by the sun by sitting in our open cars? Are we going to get Zika virus one of these days because it's coming north? We get these messages all the time. Zika. It's sometimes hard to parse the messages. It's hard to understand, like, what's really going on. What do we believe? Is a glass of wine healthy, or is it going to kill us, in the long run?
A bottle is healthy.
A bottle is healthy. There you go. You're a risk taker. So we wanted to take this idea of risk and how we assess risk, how we then manage it once we assess risk to be present in our lives in one way or another, and find a way to do it better. Because not to avoid risk, but just to know which risks are worth, indulging in. Because many of us don't know we're doing risky things sometimes, and other times we avoid things that we think are risky, but they're really not. So the idea here was to really look at a whole wide cross section of risk and how it affects our lives. In this case, I used my own life because it's just one life. It's nothing spectacular. I'm not a huge risk taker, but I am confused at times, and I want to try and understand risk and risk assessment better. So I go out and I travel to many parts of North America and to the UK to meet some really amazing risk specialists, risk experts. And they really enlightened me incredibly on a number of very topical sort of areas of concern.
And it's a nice approach because I think a lot of us, we get so many messages every day in every aspect of our lives and feel confused. And so having the sort of the narrator and having your journey through it, it doesn't make us feel dumb. You know what I mean? You're going along with it. You have all the same questions that everybody else has.
I'm the surrogate for dumb. That's right. That's right. I'm everybody's dumb. You got it.
Not how I meant it, but yes.
All right. That's a way of looking at it, I guess.
And you do certainly cover pretty much everything. I mean, so Will Gadd, who's an ice climber, who has a really fun setup in his backyard of these. He's trying to show you how to practice climbing on these like wooden plank things with picks. And I was like, oh, that is so, because I would assume you could only practice on a mountain. But he built a thing in his backyard. And he has a really interesting system that he works with his kids. that is kind of a really funny moment of his kid. One of his kids is climbing up something, and he says, "What level is this at?" And he goes, "What would happen if you fell from there?" And she goes, "Die?" It's very adorable, but also like, wait, what? And then he's like, "No, you wouldn't die from there. You would." But because,
bumps and bruises.
Yeah,
he says bumps and bruises. Yeah.
And so they've made a scale of, because he wants to take his kids hiking and stuff. And I thought, it's something that we normally don't really talk about with kids. And so what an interesting that this guy who makes his living doing this extreme sport what an interesting conversation to have, and that will then probably open up for other people to have with their kids.
Exactly. He's one of those guys, you see him up, he did 30 days of nonstop paragliding in the Rockies and didn't come down to civilization for 30 days.
But how do you stay up there for 30 days?
He had backpacks and he had his food and he...
but he would like land on the mountain?
He'd land on the mountain.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought you meant he was literally just gliding for 30 days.
30 days. 30 straight days of just gliding and gliding.
Those hikers down below got wet.
Yeah, I was like, murmur, that feels like he lied about it. Yeah. So he would land on the mountain
camp out in the mountain.
That actually sounds awesome.
Days. It's pretty amazing. And he does things like that. He goes and climbs icebergs in the North Atlantic to see the state of icebergs. And he's never done that before. He always takes on these extraordinary, what we would think of as incredible risks. But so you look at these things, you see the images on YouTube or you see them, on the news or whatever, and you think, wow, that guy is nuts. He's crazy. But in fact, it turns out, of course, as you know, since you've seen the film, he's what we call a rational daredevil. He's really intrigued by all the ins and outs and figuring out what is risky, how do we prepare, what do we do, what's our contingency plan, how does it feel. He doesn't do it in a kind of random way, which is just to get, he's not an adrenaline junkie. He's really, really intrigued by the whole process of doing things that no one else might have done before. He climbed Niagara Falls.
Yeah.
2 winters ago.
Wow.
First person ever to do that. Pretty scary stuff. But he thought it out and he was really planned and everything. So it is really a lesson in how do we look at risk. Is risk something we just get frightened by, or is it something we plan for and assess what we want to do and how we want to engage in it?
And he made a really important point for a lot of people who do, watch these YouTube videos. And you make a very clear distinction between people being idiots on YouTube versus a thoughtful person. But I thought it was really fascinating when he said, if I get there and anything feels wrong, I run away. And he's like, that's the first thing, is run away. Because if it feels wrong, something is wrong. That's right.
He's not totally scientific. He's not all about control, because he says control doesn't always get you where you want to be. It's quite metaphysical in some of his musings. And exactly. And he says, you see the guy who's climbed up Niagara Falls. What you don't see are the 2 times to each time he succeeds that he just turns back and doesn't go. Mm-hmm. So he decides there's something wrong.
And that's a good so lesson. Important.
Good lesson, yeah.
It really is so fascinating. And we talk on this show all the time about the fear factor in the media. And I thought, and I left my original notes at home, so I'm going to paraphrase this, because another quote that I thought was so great, and I forget the gentleman's name, but in talking about terrorism and the news and things like that, and leaders, he said, when people are afraid, they prefer a strong leader who is wrong to a weak leader who is right.
You actually paraphrased him perfectly. That's Bruce Schneier. He's a world renowned authority on security, and he also has written a number of terrific books on cybersecurity. But he's really interesting on how we do security theater. Basically, a bomb goes off in an airport in who knows where, let's say in Dubai, and probably wouldn't happen there because it's a police state. But maybe Mumbai, let's say. A bomb goes off there, and everyone's on high alert. Every airport around the world goes on high alert. And he's saying a lot of that is security theater. It really won't make a difference, but it's something that makes us feel better.
Yep.
you know, and it's an important thing to consider. And that's fine. He doesn't put it down. He says, but if you're spending all your money and all your attention on security theater and not dealing with the real security issues and dealing with ways of subverting and avoiding terrible outcomes, then you're barking up the wrong tree.
I'm going to bring up something that I think is really important, Robert, because you're sitting here telling us about risk aversion, but you ride a bicycle with no helmet in this documentary.
Well, that is hardly the most risky thing I do, but it is. But
it is a needless risk, sir.
Yes, ma'am. No, what actually that was an interesting situation, because I was as you know, I was dealing with really a top risk expert. He's actually a statistician at Cambridge University, and he rides all around campus on his bike. That's the way he gets around, and he never wears a helmet. But he's all about risk and the quantifying risk. So he knows what risk he's taking, but he really is. He's not going, I don't know if you noticed, but we weren't on the road. We were on a bicycle path.
Yeah.
So, and he, afterwards would tell me, and he doesn't ride he's actually quite embarrassed by that, because he's worried that his colleagues at the university are going to say, "You idiot, what are you doing? You're talking about risk, and here you are." So I accompanied him on a bike without a helmet, because I didn't have one, and he didn't have one to lend me. So that's hardly a big risk, though.
Okay, I'm just saying that bike path was still made of concrete. I mean, if you fell off.
That's right.
I tell you, that's one of those things that I look at, and I don't poo-poo it. I don't disparage it, but it's funny looking back on my childhood, and I've never worn a helmet on a bike. If I were to go out right now and buy a bike, I'd have to go out and buy a helmet too, and it would be the first time I've ever bought or worn one. Growing up as kids, we just didn't. That's a relatively new thing. And I'm not disparaging it, because obviously you should protect your head. You should be wearing one. It's funny that we weren't all those years, but we didn't. But,
I do bring in, absolutely, I'm the same way. I certainly didn't wear a helmet. And I did wear a helmet when I was downtown Toronto on the streets before they had the divided lanes and so on for bikes. But actually, I tell that story, as you know, in the film, about when I was 19. I went out, I was really drunk, and I was driving. And really, at the time, we're talking quite a while ago, there were no campaigns against drinking and driving. It was just understood that you didn't really drink heavily and drive. But, we did it because it was fun. And, I happened to have been at a bar with my buddies, and we took a chance, and I drove nearly 100 miles in a pretty drunk state, and I made it. But later on, I looked back and I said, that was really idiotic. And I did it right in the moment, because I realized that was a really stupid thing to do. So not because you did it in the past doesn't mean it's something, that is advisable. Because things can happen that even aren't in your control that could damage you on a bike.
It's funny the things that we used to do, and I don't mean 80 years ago. I mean 30 years ago, 25 years ago that you look at now. There was a time in my life, someone said this to me recently, and I went, oh, yeah, they're right. He was like, there was a time when it wasn't crazy to drive down the road with a beer. Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And I went, oh, yeah, because I remember adults, it wasn't crazy to be in the car with an adult.
Totally.
Who was sipping on a beer while driving, right?
And smoking with the kids in the back seat.
And the windows up.
Yeah, that's right.
Even look at boating. People started frowning on drinking while you boat like 2 days ago in this span of history,
It's true. It's true.
When really it's like, don't be drunk in the middle of a lake.
No.
It's a bad idea.
Or people might be swimming or, or whatever.
But these were just things we did, As a kid, I liked them fine. But to this day, I still see something very odd about the fact that we let the general public go out and buy fireworks and come home and blow stuff up in their backyard.
And you're constantly hearing about people blowing up their hands or worse.
Yeah. Well, there was that guy last year that put the Roman candle on his head because it was supposed to shoot off the ground, and it killed him instantly.
Yeah.
You know, these are major explosives that we sell for pennies on the dollar that are made cheaply and dangerously. And I mean, I look back and I go, I remember as a kid, my parents didn't let me have fireworks or firecrackers. We had sparklers, but we didn't have any, you know. And I look back now at all my friends who, as kids, their parents did let them have fireworks. I go, what the hell is wrong with you? There's no way I would let my children near fireworks. And yet we sell these in the store, you know, to the general public.
Because we're still figuring it out.
Always. And it never ends, right? We figure out risk for ourselves, and then we figure out what risks need to be managed on a bigger scale and political level. Or it's never over.
Was there anything you learned that really startled you or that made you change the way you do something in your life?
Yeah. The biggest thing I learned is not to fall into pattern thinking or presumptions about what I've heard, the received wisdom that I've heard from other people, so that I question a lot of the assumptions that I have about the world, what's safe, what's not safe, what's risky, you know, those kind of things. And I try to check into those things and then get the best information I can. I look a bit harder. I pay more attention, right, to all the risks that we face. And
can you give us an example of one of those things that maybe people are in a pattern about or making assumptions about?
Sure. One of them that is in the film is radiation. You know, what low-level radiation is all around us, right? I grew up in the Cold War era and in the 60s and 70s, and it was really, you know, Cold War meant potential nuclear annihilation. And
so
radiation.
Get under your desk.
That's right.
Duck and cover, because that will protect you.
You got it. How do you know that? You're way too young for that.
I watched a movie
one
time.
You watched a movie?
But it has always struck me as so weird.
We're not that far removed from that. I learned duck and cover.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. There you go.
I learned it.
Because
it's so strange,
work.
Right? Yeah.
That'll protect you from fallout.
Exactly. But that's the way somehow we related to radiation. Like, what is radiation? Well, nuclear war, right? So anything to do with radiation is like, whoa, that's dangerous. That's really scary, and that's terrible. We've got to avoid it at all costs. So, you know, some people, and myself included, you know, take even X-rays. You know, I don't take them for granted. I don't sort of, you know, immediately, oh, you want X-ray my teeth? Yeah, sure, go ahead. I always think about it, and I pay attention and, you know, avoid it. And so I had this preconception that all radiation is bad, all radiation needs to be avoided. And after making the film and talking to a radiation physicist at McMaster and going into a nuclear reactor and looking at the core of the nuclear reactor, I had a slightly different perspective on radiation, that there are dangers, there are risks, but you take calculated risks. You take calculated risks, try and understand what it is that you're what you're getting involved in, what you're exposing yourself to, and then look at why am I doing this?
Right.
And what's the trade-off? Like, am I getting a good benefit? Am I getting a good outcome from taking this risk? And I look at things differently that way. I start to think about them, and I weigh them a bit more than I used to. And in terms of radiation, I'm not nearly as, you know, me worry? About, you know, small doses of radiation, X-rays or MRIs or whatever, you know.
We do.
See, I am the idiot
Stop it.
for all of us.
I like to stand in front of the microwave, really close with my kind of hands cupped over my eyes, staring into it while I'm cooking something.
Yeah, that's good
like
for
just
you.
right up on
That's
it.
good, man.
That's what.
That's
Yeah.
good.
That's how, because I'm like, come on, popcorn, come on. Yeah.
Get your buzz.
Yeah.
We have to take a break, but when we come back, I do want to know, because you're really making a whole. This isn't just a documentary. There is a whole bunch of other things going along with it. It's a real initiative. And so I'd like to talk more about that when we get back.
There you have it. Robert Lang is with us. We are Ward and Al. Stick around. This is Canada Talks.
isn't the right thing to do. How can I ever change things that I feel? If I could, maybe I'd give you my word. How can I?
Let's get back to Ward and Hell on Canada Talks.
All right, we are speaking to Robert Lang. He is the award-winning documentary filmmaker behind Risk Factor and the Risk Factor Initiative. We were talking about security theater a little bit. On Twitter, listener Patty says, Duck and Cover is the original act of security theater, made us feel like we had a chance. Just this morning, I was watching a video online. There's a TV series called Adam Ruins Everything, and it started as a web series on collegehumor.com, and it's a regular TV show. But they go through, it's essentially a man who dispels myths, and one of them is he goes through all the myths about TSA and at how little the TSA, that it's security theater, and how little they do, and what their failure rate is. What is the failure rate of TSA? Do you know, Mr. Lang?
I really don't.
95%.
So what does that mean, the failure rate?
That means that 95% of people who try to get through with something that they shouldn't do.
So how do they know that if they got through?
Well, it's when they deliberately test them. Like when they deliberately test them.
Oh, I see. So it's contraband of some sort that they're testing. Interesting.
When they deliberately test people, TSA, when it tests itself and sends people through, trying to see if they get caught, 95% of the people that they send through don't get caught.
I'm not surprised.
100% of those shoes, just shoes.
But that's just it. And one of the things they point out is someone says, well, the TSA, they're really helping. And they say, what are you talking about? They only help the things we've only seen before. That's right. They said they didn't prevent the shoe bomber. They didn't prevent the underwear bomber. They didn't prevent 9/11. So they say the truth is the only thing they could prevent is stuff that's already happened.
That's right. And in fact, we go with this Bruce Schneier guy to the Boston Marathon, the finish line when the Boston Marathon, the bomber, killed 3 people and injured many others. And, the shock of it for the Boston Marathon and people in Boston was intense. Yeah. And the government and the police had to do something. So what do? They put way more police on. They have security. They have helicopters overhead. They've got people on tall buildings looking down through telescopes and binoculars looking for potential terrorists and so on. And there's no evidence that any terrorist attack has repeated itself in exactly the same place at the same, in the same kind of context. But nonetheless, people needed that. Now, Boston actually was very resilient and came back very quick, and they said Boston's strong, and we're going to, It was really quite impressive how they handled it. But still, they had to do the security theater just to give people comfort that somehow someone's looking out for their interest.
Oh, I thought something I thought was so fascinating that you covered was post 9/11 when they had the National Guard in a bunch of airports with these big guns to make everyone feel safe, and there was no bullets in the guns.
They weren't loaded.
They weren't loaded.
Oh, I did.
Talk about security theater.
Right. I thought it was so fascinating because it's so much of it's just psychology of keeping the masses calm.
I was tackled in an airport a week after September 11th by security. I went through a metal detector, and the metal detector went off. I reached in my jacket pocket too quickly. An agent threw me to the ground, TSA agent, threw me to the ground, and I had a metal wrapper in my pocket.
Oh, like a juicy fruit?
Condom.
Oh, okay.
And like that, but what you saw was that everybody wanted to see them do something.
Yeah.
Everyone wanted to see them do something.
And
could that also be why Americans believe so strongly in the myth of the good guy with the gun? This idea, I hear people all the time who think that the answer to guns is more guns. We need more of them. If we all had guns, we'd be safer.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And yet,
I mean,
it's riskier.
Yeah, and it's so counterintuitive. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's so unbelievable.
But speaking of risk, that's what's interesting more than anything when it comes to risk. We are talking about Risk Factor, the documentary, plus the Risk Factor Initiative. What I find fascinating is how much the average person believes he will not be a statistic. that he will beat the odds. And you see that all the time. We've talked on this show numerous times about if you own a weapon, if you own a handgun, you're more likely to be shot with it than to ever use it in self-defense. Those are just the facts. That's the statistics. Everyone believes it won't be them. Everyone believes that they will be the person that will thwart the shooting, to stop the intruder, to, whatever. And that's so interesting to me that there's certain things that people are going, no, I won't be that. I will be the thing that trumps the statistics, right? Yeah. And I mean, what are some other things like that where people do that? Seatbelts. There are people still that are like, no, I don't need to wear a seatbelt
because I'm a good driver.
Yeah, because I will not be that statistic. Right. I will beat it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Speaking of trying to assess risk, you and Sir. He's a sir.
He's a sir, man.
It's a big deal.
He
Sir,
is a sir.
David Spiegelhalter have created an app.
Well, David Spiegelhalter is the statistician that I mentioned who studies risk and the public perception of risk. So he's a lot of data. He's all about data, but he's not actually all about data. He's a really good guy, and he's a salsa dancer and a snowboarder and does all kinds of cool things. But he has studied risk and the data around risk, so he will be able to say, Ward, how dangerous really is it to drive without your seatbelts? He'll have the statistics on that. And
I find that fascinating.
It's really interesting. So he helped us in the sense that he provided us with as much data as he had on different risks that we all take. Many from skiing to riding a bike to
adjusting your radio while you're driving,
plane, texting and driving, or adjusting your radio. He doesn't have that one, but texting and driving. Yeah.
This guy used to have a car that had Sirius in it, and he would constantly be fiddling with it, and I'd be like, "Can you look at the road, though?
No, she's right.
Don't touch it."
So I wound up getting a different radio. No, seriously, I wound up getting a different radio for that reason. But I was bad about looking down at my radio and adjusting the radio.
And now look at these screens that are on all the new cars. It's like, well, you can't text and drive, but you can, go and press the buttons
touch screens.
Try and figure out the navigation, where you're going, and you're looking down. Even worse than if you had your cell phone in front of you.
On my brother's, you can watch a movie.
No.
You can put a DVD in the CD drive.
In the front seat?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, my God.
Yes.
Now it says when the screen comes up, it says, don't do this while you're driving.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But
Okay.
you can just go, I won't.
Oh, no, I won't. I'll just look out of the corner of my eye.
Yeah. So many of we often get to test drive new vehicles. And all of them come with these enormous touch screens now where everything's on there, not just navigation.
I know.
I mean, you can go, oh, it's navigation, but not just navigation.
All your entertainment,
Yeah.
all that stuff. I know. So we created this app, and it's available free of charge on Android and iOS, Apple and Android. And it's called the Risk Navigator. And Risk Navigator is a way of assessing one's own risks and also how rewarding these risks are for you. So it tries to give you a sense of the risk-reward balance in your life. So you pick things like drinking or
Shark attack.
Shark attack. Well, no, shark attack is something you have to go after.
Yeah, you have
this
to
has to
seek
be an
out a
activity you
shark.
have to seek. And shark attack is
Can I use the app in the ocean?
if you have the right phone, you can.
Okay, all right. Shark attack.
Okay, you try the shark attack.
Running with the bulls.
We are asking people to contribute if they don't see the activity, and if there is the data available. We're saying send us a note, and we'll try and find the data and put it up there. It's going to be constantly renewed and added to. Right now it's only 100 and some odd activities. It'll be many more by the time it's done. But it's a fun way.
I could be like tickling coyotes and send it to you.
But that's not an activity.
You have never enjoyed a good summer jamboree with coyote tickling.
Ward does that once a year.
Yeah.
Tickles the coyotes.
If you had never heard of it, and I told you that people love to run with bulls.
Well, no, and that's a great example of something just ridiculous human beings do, right? Why is that? Is that in the app?
The data probably is available in that, and I think now that you mention it, I'm gonna find out from David or from the other people working, because it's a team effort.
For sure,
we have a lot
communal.
of people working on it, but I'll find out. Running with the Bulls is a really good one, because I'm sure that's pretty high risk pursuit.
Well, it goes to show that human beings have been ridiculous for centuries.
Yeah.
I mean, what is wrong with us?
It's funny when you really stop and think about something like that. I made a joke about coyote tickling, but there are people, hundreds of people every year that run down the street with bulls. Angry, violent
bulls that are after them.
Even bullfighting. Even the fact that that's a sport. Like if Americans had a sport called grizzly tag, you'd be like, what? That's the stupid? No.
Yeah. We make a lot of bad choices.
Mm-hmm. The man is Robert Lang. The documentary is Risk Factor.
Now, we should say, so the documentary is making its Ontario premiere on August 2nd at 9 p.m. Eastern on TV Ontario. In French Canada, August 24th at 8 p.m. Eastern on Canal D. I bet in French, so it's Canal D.
You got it.
And in British Columbia on the Knowledge Network in October. But it will be available online across Canada beginning August 3rd at tvo.org.
That's correct. Yeah.
What about our American listeners? Do they ever get to have it?
They probably will. I mean, we've got a distributor now working on it, and absolutely, it probably will end up on American TV somewhere.
Just keeping it for us
No.
for now.
Yeah, just for
now.
you
For
know,
now, we're going to play
we're
it
kind
safe.
of special, here in
And,
Canada. We've got a special connection to risk. But it is part of a larger initiative that is not just the app and the film and the TV broadcast. It's also a series of screenings. We're having one tonight here in Toronto, but we've had one in Canmore. We're having screenings across the country, and there are going to be a series of talks as well about risk and involving some of the people in the film and other people as well, both in the States and in the UK.
Well, so what everybody should do is follow the campaign on social media everywhere at Live Safe But Live. And that's on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And I would imagine that all the information about various screenings and stuff will be up in those feeds.
It will, but even easier is to go to riskfactor.ca. Anybody can go online, and they can get to any of those things and get updated information on the whole initiative.
Yeah, that's some better idea.
Riskfactor.ca.
.ca.
Right.
Thank you so much for being here,
Nice
Robert.
talking to you again.
I enjoyed it. Thank you very much for your interest.
And we'll see you with the next documentary.
Probably. Equalizer Winter.
Ooh.
We're doing one that's going to be finished
I like
this
that.
winter. Yeah.
Okay. Finding out if the old-timey athletes match up with the new-timey athletes.
Right on.
I love it.
Yeah. 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 Right on.